morning. I'm really happy to see so many people are interested in the ocean. So when you think about the ocean, think about life in the ocean, most people think about the big things, the whales and the sharks and the fish. But today I'm actually going to investigate what's in this glass of seawater here, this bottle of seawater. Most of the living organisms that sort of feed the fish and feed the sharks are actually microscopic. And so we're going to take a look at what those organisms are. And I'm going to show you some images, and you'll see that you need a special microscope to really see what's going on. So the outline of the talk then is to learn about the kinds of microscopic plants and animals that make up the main part of the ocean food chain. And small is beautiful. I'm going to show you some microscopic pictures. And then if we get time, then we'll look at how they make a living. So just an overview of the ocean. Most of you know that the ocean, there's more ocean than Earth, about 70% ocean and 30% land. And the ocean has deserts just like the land does. And you can see in this satellite image of primary productivity, these sort of purple areas here, 5 of them, are sort of desert-like areas of the ocean. So these are the ones that are not very productive. It's mainly due to the fact that they don't have enough nutrients. These desert areas coincide with the surface currents. So the ocean surface currents are arranged and they form gyres. And these gyres are just a big circulation that's driven by the wind, and you can see there are actually 5 main gyres, and they match up to those desert areas of the ocean. And some of you know then that some of the plastics begin to accumulate in the center of these gyres. So these surface winds here then, they actually move the little small phytoplankton and the algae in the water because they can't swim very well. So who's living in the surface waters? Well, it's mostly invisible organisms, and they're not visible to the naked eye. They're mostly microscopic algae and animals, and they're called plankton. So there are some few technical terms that I'll introduce you to. So here's a typical food web here, and you can see here's the primary producers. These are the ones that eat the primary producers, and the energy and the food gets passed up to the fish that is well known. So the plankton, the phytoplankton, can be arranged in two groups, and one is just based on size. And we're going to talk about microns, which is a thousandth of a millimeter here. And so here's a sort of a relatively good pictorial of the size range. So these are the big algae, the big phytoplankton here. Here's the intermediate ones, and here are the small ones. Notice the big ones start even with this micro. So you could already know that they're small. And then we go to nano, which is even smaller. Then we go to pico, which is even smaller again. So there's a huge size range here, about 100 times in these primary producers. The other way to group the phytoplankton is by their cell covering. So some of them actually have glass, some of them have cellulose plates, and some have chalk. And so they fall into 3 main groups, and I'll be talking about those today. So the diatoms, so if you tell people that I'm studying plants, ocean plants, and they actually live in a glass box, they're quite surprised. And similarly with the dinoflagellates and cotylophores with their unusual coverings. So here's just a quick sort of sketch of what they look like. So here are the diatoms here are the dinoflagellates here. They swim, and here are these cotylophores with these chalk-like plates. Let's take a closer look. So we're going to look at the diatoms first, and these are these plants that live in a glass box. This glass is just like the window glass. These are the main primary producers. So these are like the grass of the sea. And I'm going to show you some scanning electron images here that they're so small that we need a special microscope to see some of their beautiful structures. Here's a very large one here, just a big, looks like a big wheel. And you can see here, these are green chloroplasts inside here, and it's all perfectly formed, even though it's microscopic. Here's another one. This part is the cell, and this outer part is actually just sort of a very thin wing-like structure, and that helps it so it doesn't sink in the water column. And these structures and the shapes become amazing. It's sort of almost like science fiction. You wonder how nature could actually form some of these cells here that are these sort of unusual shapes. Here's a rootlet. Here's one that's star-like. Here's one that actually just joined in the corners here. And here are some here that this is a cell part here, and they have these long appendages. So they have infinite variety of shapes and forms. So many of the diatoms form chains. So each one of these is a cell, and it's hooked together in a simple chain here. Here's another one that's hooked together in a chain. Remember, these look big here, but they're actually quite small. And in this glass of water, if I hold it up to the light, I might be able to see that chain as a little thin brown thread. Here's another one here. This thread that connects them is very small in this case. You can see here some that is just divided, so there's two cells that are hooked together here. And some of these chains form sort of a helix here, and so these can be hundreds of cells long. Because they're big like that, they're quite easy for some of these small fish like the anchovy to actually catch these directly. Here's another example of how they're hooked together here then, just at the edges. And here's a colony here that's probably hundreds of cells in size. And this is all embedded in a sort of a jelly-like matrix. So you can't, doesn't show here, but this is all in a, it's like about the size of your thumb here. And so some animal that could go along and catch that whole clump here. Some of them have huge numbers of spines that helps them to be prevented from grazing, just like some of the plants have thorns. Again, these spines can be arranged in various arrangements. Here's one that's undergoing sex. So these simple plants, even though they're one cell, they actually go through just normal division, or they actually go through sexual reproduction. And inside here are male gametes, which is equivalent to our sperm. So remember this cell here that will sort of break open and allow these gametes to swim out and find a female cell and actually fertilize that cell. Here's another arrangement here. You can see these spines are quite pronounced. These spines are glass, just like the shell of the diatom. Some of the diatoms live on the bottom, so they don't all live in the water column. And sometimes if you take a surface and you actually run your hand over it, it's slimy, slippery, and that's partly due to bacteria, but partly due to this covering of these diatoms that grow on these surfaces. So what's inside a diatom? So here's a diatom here. You can see it's a glass box. There's chloroplast for photosynthesis, and in particular there are these oil droplets here. And this oil droplets then are, this has formed some of the marine oil that we find that we actually drill in our offshore drilling. So we have millions and millions and millions of these cells. When they die here, then the oil droplets coalesce, and they actually end up producing these pools of oil. Here's some of the diatoms here that are dividing. So looking at these structures here then, this is again, this microscope, you see 4 cells, and we look at it in detail, we see more structure. If we look at it again, we see more details as we get to higher and higher power. Notice this is glass. It needs holes because the nutrients have to get in and gases have to get in so they can carry on photosynthesis. Again, this is the cell here, and look at the intricate detail here that's formed perfectly. It's not one of these that's sort of off skew or faulted. They're all sort of perfectly formed. A very amazing feat that they can do this each day. They can produce a cell. There's a benthic diatom here, and they're a different shape. It doesn't show too well here, but here's a bacteria here living on this cell, so you can see how big these cells are relative to bacteria. Bacteria love to live on the cell because there's organic matter that sort of oozes out of the cell. Again, this is a diatom with these glass spines here to prevent grazers from getting in there and eating the cell. And here it is, one in more detail here. You can see these glass spines are quite thick, but some grazers now can actually just break off these spines here and actually still can get out and eat the cell. So to summarize then, the diatoms, they're made of glass. It's a glass box. They have these spines to deter being eaten. They're single cell, they're chain forming. They have sex, or they can be vegetative. They're dominant in high nutrients, and these are the major primary producers of the ocean. So these are the ones that mostly make up the fish and the whales. And they can grow really fast, and they can have 1 cell division a day, and sometimes they can actually have 3 cell divisions a day. So very fast growing. Second group are the dinoflagellates. So this is a plant that actually swims. So if I tell people I study swimming plants, they're quite amazed that on land there's no plants that move around. Some have cellulose plates, and some are harmful because they actually produce toxins. So here are 2 kinds. This one here doesn't have any plates, so we say it's naked. And it's very fragile because it doesn't have this covering. So if I were to be able to take a pin and just prick it here, it would actually explode here because it's like picking a balloon that's got no protection. Here are the armored dinoflagellates. So these have these plates of cellulose. And remember, cellulose is like when you eat celery, you actually get these strings of material stuck in your teeth. Well, that's cellulose, and of course the trees are made of cellulose also. These are swimming, and they actually have these flagella going around here or coming down here that whip along and allow it to swim. All different sizes, from really small ones to really big ones here that looks just like the Eiffel Tower. And you can see these flagella that hang down here. This flagella going around here is really complicated, complex, and because it has this spiral, the physics modelers have modeled this and shown that it actually can swim faster by having this arrangement than just having a hair hanging down. So some of the dinoflagellates may be harmful, and they can produce toxins that kill fish. Some of these toxins can actually kill humans if they're passed on to fish. And one very common toxin is paralytic shellfish poisoning. It's called paralytic because if I eat shellfish that contains this toxin, my body becomes paralyzed. And there are stories of survivors that they need mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and eventually they need an iron lung because they can't breathe anymore. Their eyes are open, nothing moves in their body. So this is one of the most serious toxins that are actually produced by organisms. A very unusual dinoflagellate is this sort of big sort of a round organism here. It doesn't have a common name. It's called Noctiluca scintillans. The scintillans comes from the fact that it produces bioluminescence. So if you are out in the water and you swish your hand through the water in the summertime, you get this sort of blue-green glow here of this bioluminescence. And it also looks red when you have lots of these cells all together. So here is the red tide formed here, comes right on the surface of the water. And it can kill fish and cause a huge amount of loss to the fish farmers. There's another red tide organism. You can see it comes right to the surface. So you can't see this cell, but when you have millions of them all together right on the surface, then this is when you get the color form. So here's a chart put out by UNESCO, and it goes to, especially to fish farmers, and it helps them to identify what species might be in the water so that they can perhaps move their fish farms around. So these species here produce this paralytic shellfish poisoning. These species here produce diuretic shellfish poisoning, so the humans then, if it's passed on to the humans, would have diarrhea. Here's one here that has amnesic shellfish poisoning, and that has a memory loss. So you, all of a sudden, quite quickly, not through old age, you can't remember where you put your keys, where you parked your car, etc. And here's ciguatera poisoning, which can have nervous system consequences. So a lot of these toxins then are transmitted through shellfish. So we don't eat these cells directly, but these cells are eaten by filter feeders, clams, and mussels. And when we eat them, the mussels and clams contain these toxins, and that's when it's transmitted to us. So just to summarize then, second group, dinoflagellates, that have two flagella. They can actually swim 1 meter per hour. So here it is in this glass here then. Can't even see it, but in actual fact, it can swim 1 meter in an hour. So they can, in 10 hours, of course, it can swim 10 meters. So they actually vertically migrate. So they go down at night, swim down at night to take up the nutrients, because they need these to grow, nitrogen and phosphorus. And then they come up, swim up in the daytime to carry on photosynthesis because they need the light. So they have lots of nutrients and how they can grow. They can form a red tide when they clump together at the surface. And in the summertime, they are dominant when there's not much wind and the water column is sort of calm. Some of these dinoflagellates can actually grow inside of corals. And so if you look at a healthy coral, the healthy coral will look brown in color. And that's because you have a plant living inside the animal, and they both benefit, which we call symbiosis. These corals, when they get too warm or they have some stress situation, they expel these dinoflagellates and they become white. And you may have read about coral bleaching. So coral bleaching shows that the corals are stressed somehow or other. They've lost their friends, they've lost their sugar-producing plants because these feed the corals, and of course the coral then may not do so well or may actually eventually die. So here's a little test here then. Where are the diatoms? And where are the dinoflagellates? Okay, let me point. So what do you think this one is? Good, diatom. How about this one? Good, diatom. How about this one? Great, you were really paying attention. This is a dinoflagellate. These are the ones that can swim. Good for you, that's great. So maybe someday you'll find somebody that has a microscope and you can actually look at these organisms under here, and they're have the color as you saw in some of these images here. They're really beautiful, and especially as they move around and everything, it's really quite fascinating. So I won't have time to complete the third group of organisms here. These are the ones that have the scales of chalk. And as you know, chalk is not transparent to light, so it's a real mystery. How can they be covered with chalk and yet get light inside to carry on photosynthesis? So if you come to my lecture next time, then you'll learn all about these organisms. Thank you.